Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy, you can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Hey fans and listeners, it's Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, your host of the podcast, Registered Sports Dietitian. Our guest today is Olivia Papakyrikos. She dedicates her career to supporting athletes and high-performing individuals in overcoming mental obstacles and achieving their best in both sport and life. With a master's degree in mental health counseling and a specialization in sport and performance psychology from Boston University, Olivia combines her deep knowledge of performance psychology and mental health to deliver tailored care. She focuses on mental wellness for competitive athletes and those facing challenges such as eating disorders, anxiety, depression, and injury recovery. Olivia's journey began at Cambridge Eating Disorder Center, where she worked as a residential clinician, helping individuals with complex eating disorders. She then transitioned to Walden Behavioral Care, working specifically with competitive athletes in the PHP and Goals program, further honoring her expertise in sports psychology and the unique mental challenges athletes face. Her work extended to various top institutions, including Tufts University, Harvard University, and Boston University, where she provided performance counseling for teams and individuals. In founding her own practice, Olivia sought to create a space where athletes, performing artists, and other high-performing individuals could find the support they needed to excel. Papakyrikos Therapy and Performance Incorporated offers a combination of clinical services and sports performance consulting tailored to each client's specific needs. Olivia's approach emphasizes a strong, compassionate relationship with her clients, guiding them to build mental resilience, improve confidence, and navigate the pressures of their respective fields. Whether you're an athlete recovering from an injury, struggling with performance anxiety, or navigating life transitions, Olivia is committed to helping you achieve mental clarity and balance. Her personalized care and evidence-based strategies empower her clients to break through mental barriers, embrace body positivity, and find success both on and off the field. Reach out to Olivia today to begin your journey towards optimal mental health and performance. Listen to this episode to learn more about her, and we're going to dive into exactly how she helps and some of the problems that she helps athletes overcome. Olivia, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome. I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the work that you do, really goes side by side. I'm sure you've worked alongside sports dietitians and dietitians in your career field. So super welcome to have you on this podcast. And then I shared with you on a personal level when I saw your message come in as a request to be on this show, I was just like, ooh, someone from Boston. Yeah. I love that. Which is, Massachusetts is my former home. So I love to see the work. There's so many universities there, high performing athletes, and we're going to get into later. The Female Athlete Conference is hosted there on an annual basis. So it's a nice little hub, and hopefully you've got a lot of work to do. Well, not hopefully, but at the same time, good work to be done there.
Mm-hmm. It's a busy area. There's a lot going on, and it's definitely a very active area to be involved in the field.
So let's start with your personal story. Why did you get into mental health? And then it sounds like professionally there was a start in the eating disorder space, but, right now you help with mental struggles beyond just that. So tell me a bit about your personal passion and what got you to this point.
Yeah, totally. So this point was never something I originally anticipated. When I was in college, I played field hockey and I was navigating injury. I was a psych major and I knew, let's do something in the field. Let's do something involving this. But I really had no idea. And it was my freshman and sophomore year. I had to get 2 surgeries on my legs each season. And I was out all spring. It was a pretty demanding process. And it was bringing up just a lot of stress, a lot of difficulty, and even easing back into sport, knowing, I'd missed the whole spring season, was really tricky to navigate. And that opened my eyes to like the world of sports performance, sports psych, all of that. I had no idea that field even existed up until then. And so I kind of started to do a little bit of digging, do my own work in it, and even start working with a sports psych who was at our school. And that kind of just led to like wanting to pursue my master's, wanting to kind of focus on a lot of this stuff, because it had helped me so much when I was like, especially my senior year, jumping into sports and really trying to like finish it out. Like I feel like athletes, when they're in their senior year of college and they're not planning on, playing any longer, like we start to just like, our bodies are just feeling the wear and tear, and it's exhausting. And I used to be like so anxious before a game would start, being like, how am I going to get through 70 minutes of playing field hockey? Like, how can I do this? And so it was such a critical thing for me that I was like, I want to help other athletes navigating this, because I was dealing with that anxiety. I was dealing with all these things going on. And like, it kind of just all led me to get my degree and then start kind of pursuing some of these internships and like find this niche.
Thank you for sharing that. That was actually really reminiscent of some experiences I had my senior year as well, because I think my mental health struggles as it pertains to athletics were probably at their height senior year. And it was kind of that pressure of like, this is coming to an end for me. I wasn't going to be professional. Like, I knew athletics were part of my life just because I love them, but it was all coming to an end. And like, oh man, 8 years of like dedicated training, like I was feeling that pressure, and also honestly disappointment in myself. And so that was, I struggled. And like you mentioned, you didn't even know this was a field. Sometimes we don't even know help is available until we need it or, and honestly, that's something that probably should change, and why this conversation today is important, because what if we started preparing people for mental resiliency before senior year, or talking about the difficulties of injury, the day they get injured, not 3 months into the recovery process when they're already struggling, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, and there's just so much, like with injury, there's also just so much in general that you're already feeling isolated from your team. Like you already have all these barriers you're facing in the first place, that like there's just all these supports need to be so much, more apparent and accessible to everyone, because it can make this like really large difference, and people don't know until after the fact, or they don't know until it's like you're really feeling the impact of all these things.
And you just reminded me of a client I had a couple years ago who, not on a team, not a college athlete, a mother, a recreational athlete in her, I think, early 40s, but like it was her friend group was running, right? Her running group was like, that was so big for her, and cycling. She did cycling too. It was like, that was her social life. That was her friend group. And so when she was injured and she was coming to me for help with her nutrition and her injury, like, it was such a mental low for her, because she wasn't meeting up with her girlfriends for a run 3 times a week, and she wasn't getting those long runs in and the brunch afterwards. And she felt really, left out. And that was really hard. So this injury it's from the performance side of how am I going to get back to sport, maybe pressures they're facing, but then also like feeling left out socially, maybe not feeling like their sense of self and identity quite the same.
Totally. And the identity piece, like that's so huge, because athletes nowadays like are specializing so young that it starts to become this sole, identity that they take. And that's not usually really healthy for anyone, because you're so much more than just an athlete in this sport. And when we have that like disconnection from it for whatever reason, it can be really difficult to navigate and grapple with, because it's like such a huge part of who we are and how we live our life.
Yeah, I think that we are, I'm saying we is just a general we. We are empowered by the identity of athlete. Like when we're, it's something that makes us strong and gives us confidence and separates us from the non-athletes. Not saying that they're not wonderful, but like there is something about, for those of us who really love sport and pushing our bodies and competing and training, like we pride ourselves on that piece of our identity. And so when suddenly that is shaken, it's really hard. And what I'm hearing from you is like, it's so important to find other identities, more than one, and embrace all the sides of you. You're more than just an athlete. I don't know. Olivia, I want to hit this home harder somehow, because I feel like that phrase, like you're more than an athlete, like it is true and we need to embrace it. But I also know there's so many people out there that just resent that statement.
Totally. Because it's their whole world. Like if they eat, sleep, and breathe their sport. But I think for me, at least, like looking at my athletic career, once I graduated college, I kind of stopped identifying as an athlete, not because I wanted to. And now I do identify as an athlete again, but I kind of lost that part of myself. Like field hockey was no longer this big presence in my life because it's not a sport you can access like everywhere and anywhere. And so I was like, well, I'm not a field hockey player anymore. So does that mean I'm not an athlete? You know, I didn't know how to find the right fitness regimen for me that worked to move my body, but like it wasn't practice and playing in games. And like, it was hard. And I felt like, okay, I'm not an athlete anymore. I don't do this stuff. That's just not me. And I almost had a harder time identifying with other athletes because I was like, well, that's who I used to be. And it wasn't until I like figured out, one, all those other parts of me, but two, the way I could still be an athlete and how being an athlete looked in this new phase of my life, that I was able to reconnect with that identity. And I feel like athletes don't love this idea, you know, like that there's so much more, because being an athlete is all the hours they spend doing it, all the time, the energy.
That's all they want.
Yeah. And they're driven by it. But it's, in the end of the day, you're also a person. Like you're a daughter, a son, you know, a friend. Like even those are identities that we carry. It's just how much emphasis we're putting in that, how much energy we're doing.
Yeah, I think like when I obviously handle the nutrition side, but these topics come up when I have an athlete who is injured, and you know, I'm counseling in a sense. I always say, okay, I'm not the therapist here. This is outside my scope, but you know, I can give little advice just the same that you would say, like, oh, you might need to eat a lunch, you know, like
eat a little more.
Yeah, let's eat lunch, right? For somebody who's not doing that, like we're allowed to give a little bit of advice. But anyways, I typically, when somebody is really struggling, like because of injury or just their identity with an athlete, my first advice is for them to use this as an opportunity to explore all the other parts of them that they haven't had time to, because so much of their life and energy, time, focus, attention is given towards athletics. Maybe this downtime, this injury time, or whatever it might be, a change in teams, or you didn't get picked up how you thought you were going to, right? And it's like, wait, we can embrace, let's, you know, maybe you've got 50 unread text messages from your friends and you're always saying no to social events. Like, maybe we can say yes for the next few months and like re-engage some friendships and say yes to that. Or like, you know, there's so many things. And I try to encourage people to see it as an opportunity to embrace the other things while still having confidence that they are still an athlete. And so as you mentioned in your journey is like, you came back to it. You identify as an athlete now because you just had to find your way. But I think it's an opportunity to expand on all those other areas of who you are. Yeah,
totally. And I think inherently, like, we're all looking for those things. Like, we're never just like fully, like my identity is constantly evolving. Like I may identify as a knitter in 5 years, or like maybe I'll pick up like a new sport and do it on the side and be a basketball player, you know? And I think like our identities aren't just like this one set thing, and we're constantly exploring and finding our way and finding new passions. And I think like also just acknowledging that that's normal. Like we're not just like one thing. We grow and we evolve with time, and you know, it's always something that there's room to explore.
And also life happens, right? I'm thinking about myself right now and I'm like, oh yeah, like in the last 3 years, my identity now is as a mom. And then in the last year, I suddenly picked up this identity as a medical mom too. And I'm like, well, I wasn't expecting that, right? But like, that's a huge focus in my life now. And so yes, we get to explore and choose different things that we want to engage in and focus on and like kind of, attach ourselves to identify as. And also life happens, and you know, whether or not you wanted to be somebody's daughter, you are, right? So like that's, you know, you didn't choose that identity, and yet you are. And there's times in your life where you really need to lean into those things. That's just, Well, and so I actually wanted to get into something we've been hitting on the injury recovery thing, but I wanted to kind of hit on 3 different areas for you of like, when we talk about mental health, obviously everybody can benefit from mental health. And as we alluded to, though, sometimes we don't necessarily look for something until there's suddenly a problem. And what I was picking up in my conversations with you prior to this conversation and so far is it seems like you work with a lot of athletes struggling with eating disorders during times of injury, and then also dealing with the actual like performance piece. And I was thinking about this and I'm like, ooh, these are like timeline wise, I was like, eating disorders can sometimes be going on for years, and it might take months or years to fully recover fully and like navigate all those weeds. And I was thinking like injuries, well, it might be like, oh, I tore my ACL. Like this is like a 9-month recovery, right? Or like I can't participate with the team for the next 4 weeks. So it's kind of more like a temporary things. And then like talking about performance, like performance anxieties or sports psychology, being like ready to give it 100% or to tap into a different mindset to really up level your performance. That's like immediate. That's like, what are the mantras I'm saying before I step on the field? What's my routine the night before the big competition, right? So that's like, we've got like long-term, like temporary and like immediate. And I was just kind of interested in, I don't have a super specific question, but like, there's got to be different approaches that you're taking, not just based on the need, but based on like timeline to ultimate goal, right?
Yeah, totally. I also think not only just the need and the timeline, but like the person. And so like whenever anyone comes into that space and wants to kind of start working together, there's this assessment piece of like, you're a whole person. And so even if you're coming to me and saying, hey, like I choke up every time I get to the free throw line and I can't, make my shots anymore, I don't know what to do. You're coming with a performance specific issue, but my job is also to assess you as a whole, to see like, okay, are we having any other performance related issues in school with friends? Are we feeling anxious when we're around our friends? What are these other areas of our life? And so in some ways, like in those first beginning stages of any of these situations, right, it's pretty similar, right? We're kind of just feeling out like, what does your world look like? What are all these factors? And trying to understand, okay, what might be causing this issue, right? Because it's not just, oh, I all of a sudden have more pressure on me because coach is saying it all depends on me. There could be all these other things going on that are actually directly impacting our ability to make those shots. And that's like this first assessment period where a lot of people come to me and they're like, wait, I didn't think we'd be talking about these things. And I'm like, well, in the end of the day, right, like we don't exist in silos. It's not just like I can't make my shots, but also, things are going to impact each other in many ways. And so the initial approach for me is almost always pretty similar, maybe a little bit of, deviation depending on what they're coming in with or, what their just like comfort level with therapy is. But then you're right. Like when it's someone who's in eating disorder therapy versus someone who is, having more performance related issues, even like our long-term goals and our short-term goals are going to look different, right? Like the short-term one is going to be a lot more skill-based. It's going to be a lot more like, let's try these things. Let's do trial and error, experiment as we unpack this to see how we can help cope with some of those emotions. Whereas, with the longer-term stuff, more the eating disorder treatment or, even more extensive injury, there's a lot of like processing and validating of like the emotions in the forefront before we even jump into all those skills, because it's an ongoing process. Like we're trying to make long-term change versus necessarily cope with a potential like up and down that could happen at any point.
Oh my God. Makes so much sense. And it was almost like, that's so funny because as you were answering, I was like, duh, Lindsay, this just makes so much sense because, okay, one, like as a dietitian, this is why when people come to me like, oh, I just want one consult, like just evaluate my diet and like give me a meal plan. That's kind of that need of like, oh, I just need help with my mindset during the free throw shot. It's like, okay, the client thinks that's what the problem is, but we know as professionals, there's a bigger picture here. And so, we'll meet them where they're at. We'll talk about, okay, all right, this is the assessment of your diet. Here's some tips, but that's really just the opening of really treating you as a whole person, getting to root problems, seeing the big picture, kind of holistic. And I just have to share these stories because I just think maybe somebody out there will hear it and they'll be like, oh, it's happening to me too. But we had a high school athlete a couple of years ago who was really struggling on race day fueling and was having tons of anxiety, found herself not able to keep food down, would find herself like throwing up before a race.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're working on the nutrition side of things of like, you know, choosing really simple, easy digested carbs, working on her meal the night before, hydration. But we did kind of keep peeling away layers of the onion, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it was like, wait, this is an anxiety problem. This is not a like just I'm nervous and can't digest my food. This is an anxiety problem. And then we kept kind of peeling the layers away. And it was like, ooh, this isn't actually a sports like anxiety problem. It was a social anxiety problem.
Yeah.
And we kept peeling the layers of the onion away. And oh, because high school drama, there's a boy who keeps showing up to the races and it was an issue for her, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa. And this took forever to figure out, right? So yes, that immediate, oh, I just need help. Like, I get that as a dietitian. Oh, just tell me what to eat beforehand because I keep throwing up. And it's like, but why? Why? We have to get to that root problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel... Yeah, that was really like eye-opening to me too, even as a dietitian, of like thinking about where my clients are at in their life, like social pressures in high school and college are greatly going to affect performance. They do in the professional setting. There's professional athletes of all different ages. I just feel like it's like stronger in the younger population. Would you agree or disagree?
I think so. I would say so, just because like their brains are still developing. Like there's so many developmental pieces that are coming up that, you know, they're not used to some of these situations yet.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know there's drama on a professional team with people in their later 20s or early 30s as well. But like people generally have a stronger sense of self or like don't give a whatever anymore. But like, right. Yeah. But at those younger years, it can be so difficult and that can really shape how you're showing up mentally and your mental health. So, you know, we want to always say like sports performance, like, you know, give it 100%. And there's all these other factors that are going into what's affecting your game.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And like, I think with that social, like with the piece for that person and the social example, it's like the amount of times I've heard about like teammates not being nice to teammates, like especially at like high school and even college, it's like people can be mean and like they're developing, they have their own insecurities and beliefs. And so like some not nice things can happen in these spaces and people can say hurtful things. And like, that's going to make us not feel in that community or connected and involved. And that's going to impact our performance. And so like so many of these social dynamics are popping up and it's like, typically someone's not coming to me and saying, oh, that's the issue, but it's really getting to the root of it because it's also hard to admit like, hey, my teammates aren't always being nice to me, or hey, I don't quite fit in this crowd. How do I navigate this? For people in that age range, like that's hard to say because it feels like, oh, there's something wrong with me. But in reality, it's like, no, there's just, we're human. We're not going to jive and connect with everybody. And how do we navigate that? Because it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And obviously that behavior isn't really acceptable or appropriate of the other person, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So my background in sport is track and field and well, in college at least. And the track and field teams, like the men's and women's teams are really close and often sometimes even share coaches, right?
Yeah.
Like head coaches are typically different, but like event coaches might coach both the men and the women. And when I was in college, my team was very social and close with the swim team as well. And the swim team is another sport that like men's and women's like overlap quite a bit. Just in contrast to something, for example, field hockey, you know, like that's a women's sport, right? Football, men's sport. And even just when there are other sports, sometimes there's more separation. I don't know. There's something about track and field and swimming where there's a lot of like overlap. And I guess I bring this up just in continuing the conversation about like social aspects and dynamics of different genders and you know, and we're in a different age now too, where you can have a different gender identity than the gendered team that you're necessarily on. So we've got that influencing things too. But I think the reason I'm even talking about this right now is just the whole idea of mental health struggles. And I think that there's differences in how we handle social situations among different gender identities and the sexes. And then like because I'm just sharing this because that girl that I worked with and also myself, like, when I was in college, my boyfriend was on the boys track team. But then like when we had a fight, like that, like screwed up practice for me.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally. Totally. Yeah. It's like your
And
life is like in the same space. Yeah.
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 So I think there's something, one of my questions for you that we've already touched on was just like struggles that maybe collegiate athletes face that might be different than professional athletes or recreational athletes from that mental health. And I do feel that this social life aspect and like relationships and mean girls and boyfriend drama is one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And I think, yeah, like there's so many pieces, like even just, boiling it down to, I think professional athletes typically have way more access to a lot more resources, a lot more staff that are supporting them. And college athletes do too, but not as much, not as accessible, and not as all encompassing. And so like all of the things that they're facing, they're navigating with just like a little bit less support or a little bit less of this community that's holding them. And the social thing is a perfect example of that. I mean, even like coaches, right? The hats that a coach wears in college versus the professional coach, right? The professional coach is your coach, and there's a dietitian, and there's, sports med, and there's this and that are all just like right there at your doorstep versus in college, like, we have some of those things, but not all colleges and athletes have access to a dietitian or this or that on staff. And I think all those things, sometimes coaches also can take on a lot more hats and roles, and that can also impact all these athletes. And I remember when I was in college, my coach was having us all do food logs, and she had no nutrition experience, and she was telling us like, you need to eat more,
Wow.
You need to eat all these things. And it was like, we would get kind of scolded for, not necessarily eating enough, but it wasn't that we weren't. And in looking back, like she had no background to even be making those judgments. She wasn't consulting anybody. She just was saying, in her opinion, this isn't enough. And I think like the roles that even coaches play in an athlete's life is a big difference in just how they can maybe take on different struggles or like struggle with mental health things in general.
Yeah, because I feel like in that situation, it's like now an athlete, instead of feeling comfortable talking to their coach about, their speed or how they can improve at after the game, it's like, wait, I'm feeling insecure because she knows I didn't eat enough protein and she's judging me for that. Right. So it's like kind of, that somewhat staying in your lane can be helpful so that we can focus on the things that we need to focus on.
Yeah.
Or in the right context, in the right space.
Yeah. Well, and I think that with that too, it's so important because a lot of some of these mental health issues that some of these athletes are struggling with, even if it's not from that stuff, it's still impacting it. And so like coach saying this or having this response or doing this is adding extra, to their potential stressors, adding more to whatever they're navigating, whether it's depression, anxiety, injury, whatever it may be. But it's like, how are we supporting these athletes as a whole and as a community? Because they already have so much on their plate, and we don't want to be making it worse for them. We don't want to be making it harder for them to navigate the day-to-day because we're already asking them to do so much. We're asking them to balance so many things that not everyone else is balancing.
Yeah. Now, in your practice, in your business, you're currently working like contracting with a lot of teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
As that like consulting. So you work one-on-one, but you're also consulting with these teams. So is that something that you can kind of, it automatically takes that responsibility away from the coaches a little bit. Yeah. Because it's like, oh, Olivia's here. She's going to address this topic and she's a resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think I really admire athletic departments who kind of embody that approach because it does give a lot more support to the athletes and especially, the contracted type of dynamic because they know like I am not an employee of Northeastern or I'm not an employee of UMass Amherst.
Yeah.
They have contracted my business to provide for their athletes. And so with that, it also gives them a sense of assurance of like, this isn't just another person that's going to go tell coach what you're saying. And even if, they know that confidentiality exists, I think sometimes too, like having a space that they know, like, although I'm connected to the university, I'm not working for them and that my allegiance is to you and to making sure you have the support you need and you have the skills and tools because sometimes, right, like they just need that space that's so removed. And I think that's the real beauty of kind of being contracted on. And like I've done team workshops, I've done things like that too, but to kind of have that one-on-one time with them, it becomes a lot safer of a space for them to really struggle and be like, I'm not okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's wonderful. So another thing I wanted to talk about is, based in Boston over, I think, you can correct me, I'm not sure how many years now, but quite a number of years, there's been an annual conference called the Female Athlete Conference, and you're actually on the planning committee.
Yes. Yep.
Have you been on the committee since the inception, or is a newer thing?
Yeah. So I started off with the planning committee 2 years ago. So with the last conference, some of my colleagues that I work with, dietitians that are on the planning committee, and, I do a lot of work with the female athlete program just because when you're working in the eating disorder population, like there's a lot of really amazing doctors there that have really good expertise in the medical components of treating an eating disorder. And so I was already connected to a lot of those people and they needed more help and support. So I got brought on with the last conference and, it's starting to kind of pick up even more now because next summer we have the next conference. And so it's a really amazing opportunity. I actually really love kind of getting connected with it.
Yeah. So it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it started kind of out of the female athlete medical program at Boston Children's Hospital.
Correct.
And so, yeah. Okay. And that's why it has those ties to maybe eating disorders and, because a special female athlete department and they do treat a lot of eating disorders and then but the conference itself now isn't eating disorder specific. It's how do we support female athletes? Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, I think the most amazing thing because, and they talk about this a lot, but it's roughly 11% or 6%, something like that. Only 6 or 11% of the research done on how we support athletes in every domain, medically, endo, is done on exclusively female athletes. Most of it's done on male athletes or a mix of both, but not really identifying the female factors that come up. And so much research out there isn't even done on how we support female athletes that it's a really cool space for everyone to kind of come together in their own specialties and their own domains and really share research, share experiences, and really find the best way to support female athletes because so many female athletes out there are even just having their issues be written off or their issues be said nope, it's fine, it's nothing, when there's really severe things going on that, just because one person can't figure it out or diagnose doesn't mean it's not still there and it's not a real thing,
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Yes, you are correct on that statistic, by the way, because I was researching recently as well. And it just all depends on exactly which field are we looking at. Sports science? Are we looking at nutrition? Are we looking at medical science? And what years? Are we looking at from 1950 on or just in the 2000s, right? So that's where that 6 to 11, 12% are and it's closer to the 6% of research is exclusively female. And then sometimes we do have up to in the whole medical health field, up to 30% of research includes women. So mixed men and women.
Yeah.
But that's still wow, that's nothing, right?
Yep.
And it is so needed in everything. Now, what about mental health research? How much mental health research is on exclusively women? But we all know this anecdotally with our hormones that our mental health changes.
Yes.
I am at this stage in my life really. So I don't know if I'm empowered. Yeah, I'm going to use the word empowered. I'm empowered by it. I track my cycle. I'm in tune with it. So I know and I feel it. And when I feel my anger come on and then when I feel that I'm more what's the word? Anger is the word. I have a phase, my PMS phase. I get angry. I don't have my patience. I don't have my loving, nurturing qualities. Yeah. And I'm more blunt and I'm get it done. All the tasks from the last 3 weeks that have been lingering, it has to get done today or I'm going to lose it, right? This is, and that's based on my hormones, right? And I'm just saying this because it's that's my mood that affects how I show up for my family, for my training, for my sport, for my work. That's my mental health. And it's not to say that that's wrong. I'm not crazy. I'm not an angry person, but how do we support female athletes? And mental health is very unique based on our cycle. And by the way, it's different if you're, on oral contraceptive or if you're pregnant or if you're postpartum or if you have the IUD. It's so different, right? We need so much more research.
So much. It's kind of sometimes it's scary to think just how much like we don't know yet about the female body and how things all work and interact, because like all those things do change it. And then all of our moods can be fluctuating and different. There's no one size fits in that sense. And like, I know there's one phase where it's like, I'm just so tired. Like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to leave my house. I'm like, I just want to relax and be cozy and like hang out. And I'm like, like that's going to then make someone who has any underlying depression going on then feel like, am I feeling depressed? Am I feeling this? Like what? It's like hard to even know what's going on. And we need more awareness of that, because with our training too, it's like, I'm big into lifting now. I do a lot of lifting as like my form of kind of movement. And if it's, a week where some of those things are happening, like I can't lift as much. Like my body is not physically able to lift the same weights I could lift the week before. And like being able to understand that and not beat myself up for it, because prior to knowing that, I was like, why can't you lift this? You lifted this last week. Like, what did you do wrong? Like, you're clearly not doing enough. And it's like, no, like my body just needs to rest. It's saying, hey, like we can't push like that today. We can't do that. And so many people don't know that because it's not common knowledge. And it's really impacting their like physical training and their mental health and how they feel about their performance.
Yes. And to your point of like, we need more research. And interestingly, we're getting there. There's a desire for it. Things like the Female Athlete Conference, like people want it. So they're starting to put more research out. And yet there's such small sample sizes. It's not always good research. And I say this because there was a study that came out very recently, and kind of the conclusion and like the title of the article was like, your female athlete performance is not affected by your menstrual cycle. And like a lot of women got upset about this because they're like, yes, it is. Like so I feel it. I live it. Right. But like it was a sample size of 20 people, and like 5 of them had, wonky cycles or whatever. And it's just like, that's just, it's not good science yet. Right. And so to your comment of like, it's kind of scary how much we don't know. I would encourage people like, but you do know, like yourself, right?
Listen to your body.
Listen to your body, and also like work with a professional like yourself to figure out what you need, or I'm going to go back to the phrase I was saying before, like peel your own onion to get to the root cause of like, what do you need to support your performance, your mental health, your nutrition, your recovery, regardless. Like we don't have the research, but you have yourself. And you can trust yourself and work with professionals to figure it out for you.
Totally. Like when something doesn't feel right, or our emotions are pointing us in this direction of like something's wrong, we have to listen to that. Like a lot of times I see so many clients be like, nope, like, but logically I know I want to do this and this is how I want to, act or proceed with X, Y, or Z. And it's like, but your emotions are telling you that for a reason, and everything is connected. And like you know best, your body, yourself best. And sometimes it's like trying to remove what our brain is thinking and just think, what am I feeling? Like, what does my body need right now? Because your brain can be influenced by anxiety or influenced by, other people around you. And so our thoughts aren't always going to be facts, but like what your body needs, like, best, you're the expert on yourself.
Yes. Beautifully said. Well, Olivia, I feel like that's a great like ending point. Great like takeaway statement for our listeners. Yes. But before I let you go, we're on to our rapid fire questions. Are you ready to play along?
Yes, I am ready.
If there's one food you could eat every single day for the rest of your life and never get sick of it, what would it be?
Brownies.
Oh, I baked brownies today.
Oh, I love brownies. That's like I could bake them every day of the week.
Yeah. Yes. Wonderful answer. I'm not sure that we've had that answer before.
All right. We're here for that.
And it's a good one. What is your favorite sport to participate in?
Basketball. I'm not great at it, but I love it. It's like feels like it's fun and it's so accessible.
I agree completely. As you just met, my toddler is currently obsessed with basketball, and like I'm playing with him, so it's not a big deal, but like but like it's fun. Like I don't know, it feels good to be on the court and like the swoosh and the bounce of the ball, and it's fast paced.
The noises, they're soothing.
I agree with you.
Like ASMR.
Yes, I agree with you. It's very cool. Okay, and what about as a spectator? What is your favorite sport to watch or cheer on?
Basketball. I love watching basketball. Big Celtics fan.
Yes, amazing. All right, last question. It's a hard question. If there's a female athlete that you want to give a shout out to for just being a role model or an inspiration, who would that be and why? I say it's hard because there's so many people to choose from.
Fair. There's definitely a lot. The first person that comes to mind is actually the person that does my lifting programming. Becca1Checka is her Instagram handle for anyone who wants to check her out. She has just done it all, and she really preaches this whole body training and really listening to what your body needs and your cycle and all of this stuff. And it's really inspiring to me because I feel like a lot of content out there is just do this and get stronger. And the way that she approaches training and really checking in with your body and your mind is such a way I've never experienced before. And I just think it's a really cool experience. And if more people in the world trained like that and thought of their bodies in that way, I feel like it could be a really positive change for just athletes and the things that they struggle with.
Oh, I love that. So her Instagram is Becca1Checka.
Yeah. Becca, number 1, and then CHECCA.
Very cool. Well, thank you for giving her a shout out. We'll have to go check her out as well and support her. And thank you for all that you do professionally and also coming onto this podcast, having this conversation that I'm sure people learned and just felt heard. And if anybody is in need, to reach out. Now, you're based in the Boston area, but just to clarify, are you in person? Are you virtual? How does that work?
Yeah, so right now I'm just virtual. I have, gone back and forth with office space and if I want to, approach in person again, but it's just hard because athletes' schedules are so chaotic. Yeah. That's nice. They can't even come in. But right now I'm virtual and kind of open to exploring that if there's a need.
Wonderful. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Olivia. We will include links to your websites and all that in the show notes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, I would truly appreciate if you could share this episode with a friend, give us a 5-star rating, or even leave a comment and a review. It really helps boost engagement and searchability and get episodes like this into the ears of people who will benefit from improving their nutrition and getting help. If you yourself are looking for more resources and help, you can head to riseupnutritionrun.com to learn about all my services and offerings. You can also find more resources at femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com, where we have all the resources surrounding this podcast. Both of those links are included in the show notes. There, you will also find ways to support this podcast. You can support the podcast with a financial contribution, link in the show notes and on the websites. And you can find ways to get in touch with me. If you are looking for help with your personal nutrition, you can head to my website and get in contact with me, and we can talk about applying for nutrition coaching help. Perhaps you are looking to be a guest on the podcast. You can head to femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com and submit a form to be a guest on this show or recommend somebody else. I also have discount codes and links to different products and companies and resources and free downloadable handouts within the websites that are always evolving and being updated. So please check them out. Many of these companies and products I do occasionally talk about on the show, but they're listed on the websites as their forever home that you can easily access when you're looking for help. Thank you so much for being a fan. Please reach out if you need help, and I'll see you in the next episode.